Hey folks, David Stewart here. Let's talk about this absolute beast of a system, the Nintendo 3DS, which I found out as of just a couple days ago has officially ceased production. I think a lot of us were expecting this, considering how long the Nintendo Switch has been out. I think it's actually coming later, I think, in the timeline than I thought it might, having been supported or really been manufactured for, I think, 10 years now. And I wanted to talk about the system because, first of all, it's really awesome. It's a great system. And I think it's the last handheld system, the last true handheld system. Now, one of the reasons that production of the Nintendo 3DS would end is because you have the Nintendo Switch, which is a hybrid system. You could play it in a handheld mode or you could hook it up to your TV. So the Nintendo Switch qualifies as a handheld because you can hold it in your hand, but it's not quite the same as a 3DS because a 3DS you can put in your pocket. Even this, which is a 3DS XL, a new 3DS XL, it's the hardware revision that they did. It's pretty much the same size as a phone, and that can fit nicely in my pocket. I could play games on the go, or if I'm out somewhere with my son and he's super bored because it takes forever to get anywhere, I can give him the 3DS and he could play Super Mario Land or something like that on it for a little while to pass the time without having to worry about losing my phone or not being able to contact someone or like giving my kid a phone to play a game on. So it's a great system for a whole bunch of reasons. I wasn't an early adopter because I already had a Nintendo DS. The price was pretty high initially, and I wasn't sold on the 3D effect. Well, I should have bought into it earlier. Not just because the 3D effect turned out to be really good, and I really actually liked the 3D effect, but also because it ended up having an absolutely killer library of games. Some of my favorite mobile games, or really some of my favorite games of all time, have come out for the Nintendo 3DS. That is something that is really cool. Now, I mentioned it's the last true handheld, and it's about the size of the phone, and I think that's one of the reasons why we are maybe saying goodbye to this form factor, the DS form factor that we've had at this point for almost 20 years. And that's because people have another electronic device that is square and fits in their pocket, and that's a phone. Indeed, I think one of the reasons that this didn't initially take off, besides having kind of a higher price, same thing with the PlayStation Vita, by the way, is because people were already putting these smartphones in their pockets. And so the appeal of a pocket device that plays games was just not as strong. It's like, there's all these phone games. I could play games on my phone. But I still say handheld gaming is great, and I would love for it to come back because really we got full-featured, full-size games for the 3DS. Games that were not content to just be mobile games. We're not talking Game Boy games from the 90s that are a couple of levels and that's it, a 30-minute experience, which some of them were. We're talking full-featured experiences, long games with lots of levels, both first-party and third-party developers. Just a ton of great games came out for this, and a lot of the games that came out for it were, I think, really, really above average in quality. Not at all the quality of a lot of the DS games that came out at this point, 20 years ago, which were kind of middling quality, or some of the quality of like the licensed Game Boy Advance games, if you remember some of those. They were high quality games. So over time, this ended up becoming a great seller and just a great system to own. I was a high school teacher, and my kids still like to carry around a 2DS or a 3DS or a PlayStation Vita for their gaming experiences and not a phone, because the gaming experiences on these are better than mobile experiences by a lot. In fact, some of my favorite RPGs of the last few years have actually come out on the Nintendo 3DS rather than on all of these other bigger, more featured systems. So it's a great system. I think now might actually be a really good time to get one if you're thinking of getting one, and you can get one for cheap. I know lots of people are trying to unload them on Craigslist, and they'll probably want to, say through the end of the year, or Facebook Marketplace, to buy other kinds of games because they're kind of done with their 3DS. But the 3DS can play, if you get especially one of these, this is a new 3DS, which has it's got this little nub on the side, so certain games can actually use this nub to look around. So you basically have the effect of two analog sticks like you'd get with this. If you can get one of these, then it'll play the new 3DS games, and there's a couple of them that you can get if you want to, including there's a Hyrule Warriors 3DS version and a Fire Emblem Warriors 3DS version, wild. Those games were out for the Wii U and the Switch, and the Switch again, respectively, for Hyrule Warriors. So that's pretty crazy that they had a 3DS version as well. But it can play those. It can play the original 3DS games. It can play all the DS library of games, and this is actually a great platform if you're wanting to emulate your old Game Boy Advance games or your Super Nintendo games. It'll run a host of emulators and run a lot of those older games really, really well. It's a great system for homebrew. It's very easy to put new software on it because you can just take the back off here, and there's a little, you have your little micro SD card in there. You can take that off, plug it into your PC, and load whatever you want onto it. I have a huge card on this, so big that the OS won't even tell me how many free blocks or whatever are available. I don't remember how big of one I put in it, but I put a bunch of big digital games on it, including one of the last games for the system. If I can find it here. There it is. Xenoblade Chronicles 3D. So I know that there's a Xenoblade Chronicles you can get for the Switch now, but you could play this in 3D, and it's actually a really cool experience. It looks really cool. It's the same basic graphics that you got on the Wii, so they're not high-def graphics, but that's pretty cool to play. Likewise, you can also get Dragon Quest VIII, which was originally a PS2 game, and boy, is it a great RPG that you can play fully featured on the Nintendo 3DS. So it's a great system. If you don't have one, you can get one for cheap. It might be a great thing to pick up as your handheld gaming device because there's not really very many pocket-sized devices anymore. And if you're going to look at the comparison between these two, this one I think is better than the PlayStation Vita. PlayStation Vita has an amazing game library. Don't get me wrong. If you include especially all the PS1 games that you can actually play on this from the store, it's incredible. And this also runs homebrew very, very well. But this one fits better in your pocket because it folds. It folds up and protects those buttons. You don't have your analog sticks getting caught in the inside of your pocket. It slips right in there. It's great for that. So let me tell you about some of my favorite games for the 3DS in case you're thinking of picking up any of these, and you can take my recommendations for what they are. I really like to play, RPGs more than anything, but not all of these are RPGs. So Super Mario 3D Land, this is a first-party title, and this is a great game for the 3DS. It's a 3D platformer that I didn't realize I needed depth perception as much as I do to play platformers because it takes a lot of the guesswork that you normally have in 3D platformers out of the equation. You can really see how far away things are. And they manipulate the camera angles in such a way to really heighten the sense of depth so you can make some really tricky jumps and things like that with this game. This is a great game. My son has had a great time playing it, so it's kid appropriate. I've had a great time playing it too. So I would definitely recommend this one as far as first party titles go. You can also get the new Super Mario Brothers. That one is not nearly as cool to me as Super Mario 3D Land. If you want a Square Enix RPG, Bravely Default is one I'd recommend. This game is like aesthetic champion of this system, and aesthetically one of my favorite games of recent years as far as the visual presentation, the music. Square Enix always does a good job with aesthetics, but they give you kind of that Final Fantasy, early Final Fantasy kind of cute chibi characters approach where the characters are rather round and cartoonish. But they're going through a hand-painted world that is nevertheless rendered with full 3D depth perception in it. Boy, it's a cool-looking game, and the music is just great, and the gameplay is really fun, too. So if you're looking for classic JRPG gameplay that's turn-based battles with a couple of twists, including picking up and playing lots of different jobs and figuring out what characters like to be what job, then this one is a lot of fun for that as well. So I think it's a great little title. It even has an intro cinematic that makes use of augmented reality, which this has, but not most games use, which is where these cameras can look out at the world and you look at the screen and it's trying to put something out in the world. So they have a little intro that uses that. That's quite a fun little novelty. So Bravely Default, I do like. You can get Bravely Default 2, by the way, on the Nintendo Switch. I'm not as crazy about Bravely Default 2 as I am about this one. This one I think is a lot of fun. Bravely Default 2 I haven't bought, but I wasn't very impressed with the demo, mostly because I didn't like the voice acting as much, and the environments just didn't look as cool on the Switch as these environments on the original game did. I also mentioned Xenoblade Chronicles 3D, which you can play, and Dragon Quest VIII. If you've never played Dragon Quest VIII, this is a great platform to play it on. Not only can you play Dragon Quest VIII on this platform, you can play, I think you could play pretty much every other Dragon Quest game if you wanted to take the time to figure out how to get them to run on here. So you could play like Dragon Quest 1 through 8 on your 3DS. How cool is that? And it's Dragon Quest VIII is a great game as well. There's a whole bunch of 3D Sonic games. So this is Sonic 2 in 3D, and there's even, I think, a Genesis collection of 3D games. These are really cool, and they actually improve the 16-bit graphics that you're used to. Remember back in the day, back in those early 90s and late 80s, you saw all those Mode 7 graphic uses on the SNES and the Genesis where scrolling backgrounds and backgrounds that moved, and how amazing that aesthetic looked back then. It's heightened by the 3D. It looks really cool in 3D where you can get even more of that sensation of the distant waterfalls, say in Green Hill Zone in Sonic the Hedgehog. Really cool to check those out. If you haven't ever played them, you could play them. It's mostly for people like me who have a lot of affection for those early games. Kirby Planet Robobot is another one that is just a lot of fun. It's my son's favorite game on the system and one of his favorite games of all time. It's a wild, fun game with great music and great gameplay that's just tons of endless variety. I have that one digitally. And what else do I have here? Oh, yeah. Can't talk about 3DS games without talking about Fire Emblem Awakening. So this is the system and the game which saved Fire Emblem. So if you like Fire Emblem Three Houses, you have this game to thank. My understanding was they were considering canceling the series, and this game became a big breakout hit. In fact, it's one of the reasons that I bought the 3DS is the popularity surrounding this game, as I wanted to play another Fire Emblem game, having not played one in years before I picked this one up. And boy, it was a great game. It was a lot of fun. Very, very good gameplay, very likable characters, very memorable characters. So if you can get your hands on Fire Emblem Awakening for the system, I think it's the best. There's 3 Fire Emblem games on the system that are 3DS games. There's this one, there's Fire Emblem Echoes, and Fire Emblem Fates. Fire Emblem Fates actually has like 3 different versions of the game that you can end up playing through, but I really think this one's probably the best of the lot as far as gameplay goes, and managing classes, managing skills that different classes can have, trying to make the best possible units by marrying your characters together and having them have offspring which come back from the future to save them. It's great. It has some of my very favorite characters in it as well. So check that one out. And lastly, this one's a weird one, but it makes a lot of use of the 3D, and that's Zelda: A Link Between Worlds. It's basically a Link to the Past map and then doing a whole bunch of new stuff with it with a new story. It's a ton of fun to play, and it's a classic game with a bunch of twists. So it's not Link to the Past at all. Has the same overworld map, but pretty much everything else is different. So it is a new and different game, and it makes use of the depth perception of the game where you're going flat to having a 3D environment. It uses it really well. So I do recommend this one. So those are some of the ones that I would recommend for it. The last one I'll say is there is a Yoshi's Island game for it, New Yoshi's Island. It looks pretty good. I'm not as big a fan of it as the other Yoshi games, but it has the classic Yoshi's Island gameplay. If you want the challenging Yoshi's Island gameplay of the original game for SNES, that's a great one to play as well. So the Nintendo 3DS turns out to be one of my favorite consoles really of all time. It's very versatile, can play a ton of homebrew. You can run emulation on it if you want to run your old ROMs, so you don't have to try to scramble around buying SNES games that you've had forever. And you could probably get it pretty cheap. It even takes 3D videos and 3D photographs, which, while they're not in great quality as far as pixels and stuff, are a pretty cool novelty as well. So Nintendo 3DS, we'll say farewell to you, only in terms of the fact that they're not making any more of you. However, I intend to keep playing you, and I think a lot of you watching are going to keep playing yours well into the future. I think it has a strong future as a pocket gaming device with very full-featured, very full-size games and a ton of homebrew options. So thanks so much, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all next time.